The alarm rang, shattering the silence of the early morning. It wasn't the first time Alex had set an ambitious goal of waking up at 5 a.m., but just like every other morning, the struggle was real. His hand shot out from under the blanket, blindly searching for the snooze button. A few more minutes, just a few more minutes, that's what he told himself every time. But those minutes turned into an hour, and before he knew it, the sun was already climbing the sky, bringing with it a wave of regret. Alex had always admired people who could wake up early, those who seemed to have their lives together. He'd read the books, watched the motivational videos, and even tried all the so-called proven methods. But no matter how hard he tried, his bed always won the battle. His dreams of being productive, hitting the gym, and starting his day with purpose faded away each morning as he buried himself deeper under the covers. One night, frustrated with his lack of discipline, he made a promise to himself. Tomorrow would be different. He would wake up early, no matter what. No more excuses. No more broken promises. He even placed his phone across the room so he would have to physically get out of bed to turn off the alarm. He went to bed feeling determined, convinced that this time, he would finally win. But when morning came, something unexpected happened. The alarm blared, louder than ever. Alex jolted awake, his body tense. For a split second, he was ready to get up and start his day. But then, his mind whispered the familiar temptation. Just a few more minutes. Just as he was about to give in, a strange noise made him freeze. It wasn't the alarm. It was coming from outside. He sat up, his heart pounding. The sound was faint at first, but it grew louder, a rhythmic tapping, like footsteps. Someone was outside his window. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the sound stopped. Alex held his breath, his sleepiness completely gone. He slowly got out of bed and moved toward the window, his pulse racing. As he pulled back the curtain, his eyes widened. What he saw changed everything. Alex's heart raced as he stared out the window, unable to shake the image of that fleeting silhouette. The figure, barely visible in the soft glow of the early light, seemed to move with a purpose that Alex had never felt before. In that suspended moment, he felt as though the mystery before him was a reflection of his own inner battle, an invitation to finally break free from the cycle of missed alarms and lost mornings. He remembered the countless times he had woken up late, feeling defeated and overwhelmed, and wondered if this was his chance to rewrite that narrative. The crisp air that seeped through the slightly ajar window carried a whisper of promise, mingling with his desperate desire for change. As he stood there, his mind began to wander back to the days when waking up early was more than a routine. It was a symbol of hope and transformation. Growing up, Alex had always admired his father, a man who rose with the sun and seemed to harness its energy to fuel his days. His father's calm determination and quiet strength were qualities that Alex had longed to emulate, but life had a way of burying those aspirations under layers of exhaustion and self-doubt. Every morning, the struggle to leave the warmth of his bed was a reminder of his inability to capture that same magic. Now, faced with this inexplicable encounter, Alex wondered if the mysterious presence was a sign that he was not alone in his battle, that maybe there was a deeper message waiting for him, a message that his journey towards self-discipline and renewal was only just beginning. In the soft haze of the early dawn, the world outside felt both familiar and unsettlingly new. The quiet streets, usually devoid of life at this hour, now seemed to be holding their breath. The distant sound of a dog barking, the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, and that inexplicable tapping outside his window merged into a symphony of signals, urging him to pay attention. Alex's mind, already racing with thoughts of missed opportunities and the haunting regret of another wasted morning, clung to each detail as if it were a clue in a grand puzzle. His heart pounded not just with fear, but with a newfound determination, a spark of motivation that told him this was more than just another sleepless night. It was a turning point. He remembered all the motivational quotes he'd read, all the advice on how to wake up early and seize the day, but none of those had ever stirred him like this moment did. Slowly, Alex began piecing together the fragments of his past and the present mystery. He recalled how each failed attempt at transforming his morning routine had left him feeling disconnected and unfulfilled. The struggle to wake up early wasn't merely about the inconvenience of snoozing alarms. It was a symbol of the larger challenges in his life, a pattern of procrastination, hesitation, and fear of the unknown. With each passing day, the weight of his own expectations had grown heavier, until it felt like he was drowning in the inertia of his habits. Yet, in that silent early morning hour, the mysterious visitor outside his window seemed to challenge him to rise above his limitations. Was it merely an intruder in the quiet darkness, or had fate sent a messenger to ignite the change he so desperately craved? The memory of his father's unwavering routine came back to him in vivid detail. He recalled how, even on the coldest mornings, his father would pull on his worn-out sneakers, lace them up with precision, and step out into the day with a confidence that was both inspiring and humbling. That image of determination had been a constant source of strength for Alex, a beacon of hope during times of self-doubt. Now, facing a similar dawn filled with unanswered questions and subtle hints of a greater purpose, Alex felt a stirring deep within him. The simple act of watching the sunrise had always been a cherished ritual in his childhood, a reminder that every day held the promise of a fresh start. But as he looked out at the world bathed in the gentle light of morning, he couldn't help but feel that something extraordinary was about to unfold, a secret waiting just beyond the horizon of his everyday life. With each passing minute, the early light grew bolder, chasing away the lingering shadows of night. Yet the mystery outside his window remained unsolved, its presence lingering like a riddle that demanded to be unraveled. Alex's thoughts turned to the many self-help books and motivational seminars he had attended, all of which preached the transformative power of rising early and seizing the day. Despite his best efforts, however, he had always found himself ensnared by the allure of sleep and the comfort of the familiar. This new encounter, so sudden and unanticipated, was a stark reminder that perhaps the key to breaking free from his cycle of procrastination wasn't in some external routine or borrowed wisdom. It was in facing the unknown, in daring to question the very habits that had held him back for so long. The room felt charged with possibility as Alex paced slowly, grappling with the reality of his situation. The figure had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind only the echo of a mysterious sound and a lingering sense of urgency. He wondered if the presence was real or a trick of his tired mind, a product of the sleep-deprived state he often found himself in. Yet deep down, a small voice insisted that this was more than a hallucination, that the universe was sending him a signal to make a change. It was a reminder that every day held the potential for a new beginning, that every sunrise was a chance to redefine one's destiny. As he stood there, the weight of his past failures mingled with the promise of an unexplored future, creating a tension that was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. In that quiet moment before the day fully broke, Alex's thoughts became a tapestry of memories and possibilities. He recalled the early mornings of his childhood when the world seemed to whisper secrets of endless adventure, when every day was a mystery waiting to be discovered. Those memories were now resurfacing with a force that he could neither ignore nor fully comprehend. The figure outside his window, the soft tapping that disrupted his sleep, and the palpable energy in the air were all interwoven with his deepest longings to reclaim the life he had always imagined. Each detail, each fleeting moment, seemed to be guiding him toward a destiny that was still hidden in the shadows of uncertainty. Yet, even as a sense of hope began to kindle within him, the unanswered questions loomed large. Who was the mysterious visitor? What message was hidden in the rhythm of those early sounds? And most importantly, how was this encounter connected to his long-fought battle to wake up early and transform his life? The silence of the morning was deafening, offering no clear answers but only deepening the intrigue that now defined his reality. As the sun climbed higher and the first hints of daylight bathed his room, Alex knew that his life was on the cusp of a dramatic shift, one that would force him to confront not just his habits, but the very essence of who he was and what he wanted to become. In that suspended moment, as the light grew brighter and the cool air carried away the remnants of night, Alex felt a surge of determination rising within him. He was no longer content to be a passive bystander in his own life. The mysterious figure, the echo of a long-forgotten promise, and the lingering allure of the early morning had all converged to offer him a glimpse of something greater. A life filled with purpose, clarity, and the relentless pursuit of self-improvement. Even though the mystery remained unsolved, the tension that gripped him was no longer a source of fear but a call to action. Every instinct told him that his journey was only just beginning, and that the answers he sought were waiting just beyond the horizon of his current understanding. With a final deep breath, Alex stepped away from the window and moved toward the door, leaving behind the familiar confines of his room and the comforting haze of sleep. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one urging him to embrace the uncertainty and step into the light of a new day. The past, with all its missed alarms and silent regrets, was fading into the background, replaced by the burning question of what lay ahead. In that pivotal moment, as the day unfolded in all its unpredictable glory, Alex realized that sometimes the most profound changes come not from meticulous planning or rigid routines, but from the unexpected moments that challenge us to rise, to confront the unknown, and to ultimately discover the strength that lies within. Alex's fingers hovered over the doorknob, his body frozen. The sound was faint, almost like a whisper, too soft to be the creak of settling wood, too deliberate to be the hum of appliances. His breath grew shallow as he strained to listen. The house was supposed to be empty. He lived alone. For a moment, he debated whether he was imagining it. His mind was already on edge after hearing those footsteps outside. Maybe he was just so desperate for change, so eager to feel like his life was shifting, that he was creating tension where there was none. But then, the noise came again. A shuffle. Slow. Measured. Coming from the hallway. His pulse pounded in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to run, to do something, but his feet stayed glued to the floor. He turned his head ever so slightly, eyes locked on the dark hallway leading to his bedroom. The light from the kitchen didn't reach that far, leaving the space shadowed, uncertain. Alex swallowed hard. He had two choices: ignore it, pretend it wasn't happening, and carry on with his morning routine, or step into the darkness and find out what was there. His stomach tightened. Everything logical in him told him to leave, to grab his keys, walk out the door, and not look back. But something inside him, some deep, irrational pull, made him take a slow step forward. His own breath felt too loud in the silence. He reached out, hand brushing against the wall as he moved closer to the hallway. He hesitated before flipping the light switch. The hallway flickered to life. Empty. The door to his bedroom was slightly open, just as he had left it. The bathroom door was shut. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. His shoulders sagged in relief, but the tension in his chest didn't fully fade. He took a cautious step forward, then another. Each movement felt deliberate, like he was walking through a dream where any wrong step could shift the world around him. When he reached his bedroom door, he pushed it open a little more, peering inside. Nothing was out of place. His blanket was still messy from when he had gotten up. His laptop sat untouched on the desk. The window was still closed. He exhaled slowly. Maybe he really was just overthinking everything. Maybe the combination of waking up earlier than usual, the eerie silence of the house, and his lingering drowsiness was making his mind play tricks on him. Deciding he needed to shake off the paranoia, he turned back toward the kitchen. He would stick to the plan. Get outside, take a walk, clear his head. But as he took a step, something caught his eye. The closet door. It was slightly open. Alex stopped mid-step, his heart skipping. He was sure, absolutely sure, that he had closed it the night before. He always did. It was a habit, just like setting his alarm or leaving his phone on the desk. He hated sleeping with the closet open. His fingers clenched into fists. His mind scrambled for a reasonable explanation. Maybe he had forgotten. Maybe the door hadn't latched properly. Maybe the air shifting in the house had made it move. But deep down, he didn't believe any of that. Slowly, he turned toward the closet, the air feeling heavier with each breath. He stared at the sliver of darkness between the door and the frame, his own reflection faintly visible in the mirror on the opposite wall. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out. He hesitated, fingers inches away from the wood. A thought whispered in his mind. What if he wasn't alone? What if something was waiting on the other side? He took a breath and, in one swift motion, yanked the door open. The closet was empty. His clothes hung neatly, shoes lined up at the bottom. There was nothing there. Alex let out a shaky laugh, rubbing his temple. He was being ridiculous. His brain was still foggy, still adjusting to this new routine. That had to be it. He needed to stop letting his mind get carried away. Shaking his head, he shut the closet door properly this time, making sure it clicked into place. He turned back toward the door, determined to put this all behind him. But just as he stepped into the hallway, his phone buzzed loudly on the desk. The sound nearly made him jump. He turned, frowning. Who would be calling him this early? He walked over and picked it up. The screen lit up with a number he didn't recognize. No name. No contact photo. Just a long string of numbers. For a moment, he considered letting it ring. But something in him, the same strange pull that had made him investigate the noise in the first place, made him press the answer button. He lifted the phone to his ear. For a second, there was only silence. Then, a voice. Low. Unfamiliar. You're awake. A chill ran down Alex's spine. Before he could say anything, the call ended. Alex stood frozen, gripping his phone so tightly his fingers turned white. The call had ended, but the voice still echoed in his mind. You're awake. Just 2 words, but they sent a cold, uneasy feeling down his spine. His first instinct was to check the number again, but when he looked at his phone, the call log showed nothing. No missed calls. No received calls. As if it had never happened. His pulse pounded in his ears. This wasn't just about waking up early anymore. Something was wrong. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to think logically. Maybe it was just a prank. Maybe he had imagined it, just like he had imagined the noises in the house. But that didn't explain why his heart was racing, why every instinct in him screamed that something was off. The air in the room felt heavier now, charged with an invisible tension. The quiet hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the faint ticking of the wall clock, everything felt too loud, too sharp. He needed to move, needed to do something before his own thoughts consumed him. He grabbed his hoodie and slipped on his sneakers. Fresh air. That's what he needed. A walk would clear his head, help him shake off this eerie feeling. The moment he stepped outside, the crisp morning air hit him, cool against his skin. The world felt different at this hour. Quieter, untouched. The streetlights flickered slightly as the last traces of night lingered in the sky. His neighborhood was always peaceful, but something about it now felt unsettling. The houses were dark, silent, as if they were abandoned instead of just filled with sleeping people. There was no sound of distant cars, no chirping birds yet, just a deep, almost unnatural stillness. He started walking, pulling his hoodie tighter around him. Each step felt heavier than the last. He tried to focus on his breathing, on the cool air filling his lungs, on the plan he had made for the morning. But his mind kept circling back to the voice. You're awake. The way it had been said, it wasn't surprised, it wasn't questioning. It was like whoever had spoken already knew. As if his waking up at 5 a.m. wasn't his own choice, but something expected. He turned a corner, his shoes scuffing softly against the pavement. That's when he saw it. A figure. Standing at the far end of the street, just barely visible in the dim light. Alex stopped in his tracks. The figure wasn't moving, just standing there, still as a shadow. His breath came shallow and uneven. It could be nothing, just someone else up early, maybe a neighbor heading to work. But something about the way they stood, motionless, facing him, made his stomach twist. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The street between them stretched out, empty and silent. Alex's fingers curled into fists. Then, in the faint light, the figure tilted its head. A slow, deliberate motion, like it was watching him, studying him. A sharp chill ran through Alex's body. He took a step back, instinct screaming at him to turn around, to run, to get away. But his feet wouldn't move fast enough. The figure took a step forward, and then another. The slow, steady pace sent a jolt of fear through Alex's chest. He took another step back, his breath coming quicker now. The figure stepped under the glow of a streetlight, and Alex's blood ran cold. It wasn't just anyone. It was him. His own face, his own hoodie, his own reflection, staring back at him. Only, something was wrong. The other version of him was smiling. A slow, unsettling grin that didn't reach its eyes. Alex's heart slammed against his ribs. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. But then, the other Alex lifted a hand and waved. A slow, mocking gesture. Alex stumbled back, his mind screaming at him to move, to do something. And then, in the blink of an eye, the figure was gone. Vanished. The street was empty. The silence pressed in around him, thick and suffocating. His hands trembled. His legs felt weak. He turned, barely able to breathe, and ran. Alex's breath burned in his chest as he ran. His sneakers pounded against the pavement, but the street felt endless, stretching longer with each frantic step. His pulse roared in his ears, drowning out everything else. He didn't know where he was running to, he just knew he had to get away. His mind couldn't make sense of what he had just seen. That wasn't possible. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. But it was. He had seen himself, standing there, smiling, waving. The thought made his stomach twist. He didn't stop running until he reached his house, his fingers fumbling as he yanked open the front door and stumbled inside. He slammed it shut, twisting the lock with shaky hands. His back pressed against the door as he tried to catch his breath. The house was silent, but not in a comforting way. His skin prickled with unease. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths as he forced himself to think, to process. His reflection, his other self, had disappeared the moment he blinked. Had it ever been there at all? He needed answers. With trembling hands, he grabbed his phone and checked the time. 5:27 a.m. The morning was still unfolding, but it felt like he had been awake for hours. He pulled up his call log again. No sign of the mysterious call. No evidence that anyone had contacted him at all. His hands clenched around the phone. He couldn't let this spiral any further. He had to ground himself. Think logically. Maybe this was some kind of waking dream. He had read about sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations. Maybe waking up earlier than usual had thrown off his body's rhythm, making him see things. That had to be it. It had to be. His gaze flickered toward the hallway mirror. He hesitated before stepping closer. His reflection stared back. Normal, exhausted, but normal. No eerie grin. No strange movements. A breath of relief escaped him. He was just on edge. His mind was playing tricks. Then his phone buzzed. The sound made him jump, nearly dropping it. He fumbled to check the screen. A notification. New message from unknown. His chest tightened. With a deep breath, he opened it. There were only 2 words. Don't run. A cold wave of fear crashed over him. His throat went dry. His fingers hovered over the screen, his mind racing. Before he could react, the power flickered. The lights in the hallway dimmed for a second before going out completely, plunging the house into darkness. Alex's breath hitched. His phone screen cast a faint glow, barely illuminating the space around him. His heart pounded as he forced himself to stay still, listening. Then, from the far end of the hallway, A sound. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. Alex's entire body tensed. He wanted to believe it was his imagination, that the darkness was playing tricks. But he wasn't imagining the sound. Someone, something, was in his house. His fingers tightened around his phone, the screen still open to the message. He needed to move, to get out. But before he could take a step, the footsteps stopped. Silence. The kind that made his skin crawl. Then, a whisper. So soft, he almost didn't catch it. "You're still awake." The voice wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from right behind him. Alex's body went rigid. The whisper brushed against his ear, so close, so real. His breath caught in his throat as a cold sensation crawled down his spine. He wanted to turn around, to see what was standing behind him, but every instinct screamed don't. His fingers gripped his phone like a lifeline, his pulse hammering. The air around him felt heavy, thick, pressing in on him from all sides. He forced himself to swallow, to think, to move. Slowly, he lifted his phone, using the dim screen as a reflection to see behind him. For a moment, there was nothing, just darkness stretching over his shoulder. Then, a face. His own. It hovered inches behind him, the same features, the same eyes, except they were wrong. Too wide. Too knowing. And that smile, that eerie, slow smile that didn't belong to him. Alex's body reacted before his mind could. He spun around, his foot catching on the edge of the rug. He stumbled back, heart slamming against his ribs, hands scrambling to brace himself. But the moment his eyes landed on the space behind him, nothing. The hallway was empty. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. His chest ached from the effort of holding himself together. His hands trembled as he gripped his phone, trying to make sense of what was happening. He had seen it. He knew he had seen it. His own reflection outside the mirror. This wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't some strange trick of the early morning haze. Something was here. His gaze flickered back to his phone screen. The message was still there. "Don't run." Alex clenched his jaw. Enough. He wasn't going to sit here, trapped in his own fear. He grabbed his keys from the counter and bolted for the front door, twisting the lock with shaky fingers. The moment he flung the door open, a wave of relief crashed through him. The outside world felt real, solid. If he could just get outside, away from whatever this was. Then he saw it. Standing at the bottom of his driveway. Himself. Still wearing the same clothes. The same hoodie. The same posture. But there was something unsettling about the way it stood. Too still. Too patient. Alex's breath hitched. His fingers gripped the doorframe. His mind screamed at him to move, to get in his car, to run. But his double raised a hand. And held up a phone. Alex's phone. No. His hand darted to his pocket, fingers digging inside. His phone was still there, warm against his palm. But his reflection, the thing that wasn't him, was holding an exact replica, screen glowing in the dim morning light. And then, without breaking eye contact, it answered a call. Alex's phone buzzed in his hand. A call. From his own number. His heart stopped. His throat went dry. He stared at the screen, pulse thundering as the call continued to ring. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The other him tilted its head, waiting. Alex swallowed hard. His thumb hovered over the screen. He knew he shouldn't answer. Every nerve in his body told him don't. But his hand moved anyway. He pressed accept. Silence. Then, his own voice, distorted, warped, almost too familiar. "You should have stayed asleep." The call ended. The figure at the end of the driveway grinned. And stepped forward. Alex's breath came in short, uneven gasps as the figure took a step forward. His chest tightened, his fingers trembling around the phone still clutched in his hand. The world around him felt distant, like he had been pulled into something beyond reality, something he wasn't meant to see. The other him kept walking, slow and deliberate, as if it had all the time in the world. The eerie smile never faded, and the glow from its phone screen cast sharp shadows across its face. Alex's mind screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He was stuck, frozen between terror and disbelief, his body refusing to obey. This wasn't possible. It wasn't real. But the pounding of his heart told him otherwise. Then, as if sensing his hesitation, the figure stopped just a few feet away. It tilted its head, watching him like it was waiting for something. Alex forced himself to speak, though his voice came out barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" The figure blinked, as if the question amused it. Then, it took another step closer, just enough for Alex to see the unsettling detail he had missed before. Its movements were slightly off. A fraction too smooth, like a recording played at the wrong speed. "I am you," it said, the words too perfectly mirrored to be human. "The version of you that never woke up." A shiver ran through Alex's entire body. None of this made sense. He had woken up at 5, just like he planned. He had done everything right. But something, somewhere, had shifted. He swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" The figure's grin widened, and it lifted its phone again, showing Alex the screen. The display was an exact copy of Alex's home screen, down to the last detail. The same apps, the same unread messages, even the same battery percentage. But the time. Alex's breath caught. On the figure's phone, the time still read 4:59 a.m. Frozen. As if it had never moved past the moment before Alex woke up. His stomach twisted. His mind raced to make sense of it, but nothing fit. The figure leaned in slightly, lowering its voice. "You weren't supposed to wake up." The word sent a cold, sharp wave of dread through Alex's chest. The street around them was still eerily quiet. No birds, no passing cars. Just this empty, early morning void where nothing felt real. Alex took a slow, careful step back. "Then what happens now?" The figure watched him, expression unreadable. "That's up to you." The air between them felt thick with something unspoken, something heavy. Alex looked down at his own phone again, at the time glowing on the screen, 5:32 a.m. He had moved past whatever had been holding the other version back. He had crossed into something else. A choice. He could stay here, frozen in fear, trying to understand the impossible. Or he could do the only thing that made sense. Move forward. His fingers curled around his phone, gripping it tight. His heartbeat steadied. He didn't know what would happen if he stayed here, staring into the face of his own shadow. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going back. Taking a deep breath, Alex turned. Not running, not rushing, just walking. Step by step. He didn't look back. The silence stretched on behind him, but he didn't stop. He reached his front door, his hand tightening around the handle. The weight of the moment pressed against him, but he pushed through it. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. For a long moment, he just stood there, his body tense, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The house was still. The air felt lighter. He exhaled slowly. His phone screen flickered. The time had changed again. 5:33 a.m. Normal. Moving forward. Alex closed his eyes for a second, grounding himself. Whatever had happened, whatever that thing was, it hadn't followed him inside. He made his way to the kitchen, still feeling the weight of everything, but pushing past it. The coffee maker beeped softly as he set it up, the sound oddly reassuring. A new day had started. He wasn't sure if he'd ever understand what had happened. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was something else entirely. But he had woken up. He had moved forward. And for now that was enough.